joining me right now in studio, this is, I asked her to come back from last week, and that's Heather Harris from Harris and Harris Injury Lawyers. I appreciate you coming back, and good to have you here.
Thanks. Good morning.
And the reason I asked you back, because last week you came in to talk about what potential problems there might be if police are not going to be going out to non-injury accidents. We talked about some various possibilities, and some might be okay, others might not be. You know, it was right after we talked about it, by the way. I was driving in on the east side, getting on at from Stephanie onto the 215 going west, and I saw, just so happens that morning, I saw a fender bender. But two people were by the side of the road, and they were exchanging stuff very peacefully. Nobody was beating each other over the head with a club or anything like that, so that worked out okay. I mean, it just happened.
As far as you know.
Right, when I left, the guy turned around and he said, "You dummy." You know, no, I looked very peaceful, very good. But you were going to check on, there was the idea that this is going on in other locales. And the question was, how are they handling it? I mean, is it working out okay? Are there problems arising from it? So you did some research, and that's why I asked you back to talk about it.
Well, what I've discovered is that's a very interesting and more in-depth question than you might imagine, and actually more in-depth than I even imagined, because if you consider the different factors that go into how people analyze this type of information, it's actually very hard to gather. One of the issues, of course, is that each city is unique and different, and the culture there is going to be different. The type of people there are going to be different. Laws in each state obviously are going to be very different, and that has a huge impact on how the states themselves are handling things, how the insurance companies are treating
Are
things.
there any locales that are similar to Clark County demographically or anything like that that might give us a little bit of an idea?
Well, generally speaking, the only places that are really doing this are major metropolitan areas. So there's certainly similarities between us and other major metropolitan areas, but there's some, for example, New York is, one place that has, a wide array of cultures. Obviously, it's much bigger than Las Vegas, but, considering the amount of culture and the amount of people and the different types of people we have here in Las Vegas, New York could be construed as somewhat similar. They absolutely will not do this. There's actually a law on the books legislatively that the police need to go to every accident. And when you look at other states, there are smaller communities like Wyoming, communities in Wyoming where this is happening, that it's kind of hard to tell how it would be similar to Las Vegas because of the type of people that live there. Rural communities is going to be different.
Is it working in those communities, though, for the communities that have decided that that police do not have to come out for non-injury accidents? Is it working for them?
And that's the problem that I ran into there, Alan. I think that there are arguments to be made on both sides. I think that if you asked the police, they would say, oh, yeah, this is working great. We didn't have the funding to provide the police to go out there in the first place. So sure, from our perspective, this is fine. From the individual's perspective, there is definitely a sense that the individual feels they're not being protected by the police, that the individual who's been in the collision is going, hey, yeah, I get that in the big picture, some of that stuff might help other people, but how does it help me if I'm in the accident and the police don't show up? There definitely has been a little bit of backlash, publicly speaking. There's been some op-ed pieces where people are saying, why am I paying taxes and the police aren't showing up? I was in an accident. I didn't think I was really that badly hurt, but come to find out later on I was, and I had a hard time conducting an investigation myself. But then there are other circumstances where, like you said, sometimes people get into a parking lot fender bender, for example. I mean, that's been a policy in Las Vegas for a long time. The police don't arrive for those sorts of things.
Private property, they don't.
Exactly. So they're basically expanding that rule now out to the streets. And that's where I think it becomes complicated, because you're not just moving 1 or 2 miles an hour, generally speaking. Yes, it's possible, but it's the kind of broad approach to how they're addressing it. What's interesting, too, is there are actually many other jurisdictions and large cities that are watching Las Vegas now. They want to see what's happening in Las Vegas, and we're getting way more coverage here on this issue than many of these other cities ever did.
Are we the largest city like this doing something like that?
No, we're not. Los Angeles, San Francisco,
L.A. Okay.
San Jose. There's actually many jurisdictions in California, partially because, as many of us are aware, there's a huge budget crisis there. Most of it was because of layoffs.
So the LAPD and SFPD and San Jose PD, they are not. They're not going out to non-injury accidents.
That's correct.
Okay. How's it working? I mean, is it working okay? I know you have to police
if you
one
want
thing.
to look at statistics,
Yeah.
Statistically speaking, the argument that, for example, that Metro was making is they needed to have cops out there
Right.
writing tickets and, making sure they're protecting the public from larger situations, making sure that people aren't speeding because that was going to keep people from getting harmed. If you look at the statistics in California, for example, from 2011 when this really started through now, and it's too early to get the 2013 statistics, but 2011, 2012, there was no change in fatalities. There was actually a slight increase in fatalities on the roads. There was an increase in some other traffic-related situations. So I don't really see that there was any measurable benefit if you're just looking at raw statistics.
So there was very little change. I'm talking with Heather Harris. She's with Harris and Harris Injury Lawyers. We're talking about the other cities, the other locales that have gone through a change similar that we've gone through. We're not the largest, we found out. LA is doing it, San Francisco, San Jose, a lot of them because of budget problems, which we've experienced here too. So police not going out to non-injury accidents here. A lot of people watching Las Vegas. It's going on in some other cities. We'll talk about some of the other stats around those cities that are also not having police go out to non-injury accidents. Great to have you with us. I'm Alan Stock, and I have Heather Harris with me. She's a lawyer with Harris and Harris Injury Lawyers. And I want to get to the calls at 257-KDWN, 257-5396. But let me just go back real quick because I want to try to be clear. What I'm hearing you say, I want to put words in your mouth. What I'm hearing you say is that in the locales like L.A., or San Francisco or San Jose, where they have decided out of financial reasons to go ahead and not have police come on out for non-injury accidents, there's been no discernible difference that's occurred.
I'd say there's been no discernible improvement. There's even an argument to be made that there's been a slight, very slight, albeit, downhill slide in terms of protection of citizens and that they are seeing a slight increase of injury accidents, a slight increase of fatalities. I don't know
Really?
that if there's if the rationale is we want police out there writing tickets and busting people for doing dangerous stuff so that other people don't get hurt.
Right.
It doesn't seem like it's very effectively happening in those jurisdictions. Now, we'll see. It remains to be seen what happens here.
How long have those jurisdictions been doing this? Do you have any idea?
It
of that?
varies. I think, let's see, San Francisco has had a general order in place since 1994. So
Wow,
they have the
okay.
longest running that I'm aware of.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that they enforce it differently, and that's kind of interesting because some jurisdictions, just as a matter of policy, not necessarily a written policy, not necessarily a publicly made policy, but just the dispatcher who's getting the calls will just say, oh, well, if everybody's okay, then just exchange information. There's not necessarily a written policy in place. They've been doing this for a while, so we have better information from them than we do other locations, but...
My question would be, and when I get the sheriff and I'll ask him this, is if an officer's driving by and he sees an accident, would they stop?
Oddly enough, I actually saw that instance myself last week. I saw people pulled over on the side of the road. I saw two cops drive by, actually, one right after the other, went right past it.
Well, that answered part of that question. 257-KWN, 257-5396. John, the Lib, you're on KDAWN. Welcome to the show this morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Hey, I was wondering if your guest, in doing her research, came across a community similar to Las Vegas that was sitting on $100 million plus surplus. The part that bothers me the most about this, it's not like the department is strapped for cash. They have an abundance of excess cash at the current time.
In answering your question, I actually didn't look at budgetary items for each city that I looked at. I was looking more at the policies that they had in place. In some of those locations, I was able to identify the reason for them developing that policy as budgetary crisis, layoffs, mass layoffs in many situations, and they basically just didn't have the manpower to be able to police in this way. I don't know that you could compare that necessarily to Las Vegas, but and I'm sorry I don't have a better answer to your question, but that's
well, that'd be my hunch, and I assumed it was outside your scope of research.
All right.
It just smacks of an act of desperation for a city that's in financial crisis, and Metro's not nearly in a state of financial crisis. They have 140 million or something. They have a mountain of cash.
Well, they got 135 million, and they also have their percentage of officers per citizen is down significantly, and now they're going to be using that surplus, as you've talked about it, for hiring new officers. That is what the commitment is. So you and I will watch and see how this develops. I appreciate your call this morning, John. I would also suggest that a lot of the accidents that have occurred I think there are probably people driving a little crazier. And I think there are more people, I'm just going to say more people getting stoned than they were before. I think marijuana's become a lot more acceptable. And I think probably a lot more people, especially California. So I just think that probably adds to the problem.
Well, it's a concern, definitely. And it really concerns me here in Las Vegas because you have a 24-hour city, truly a 24-hour city. A lot of places want to believe they're a 24-hour city. Most places aren't as 24-hour as we are.
And we have drinking 24 hours.
Drinking 24 hours. You have people that are, coming out here. I've seen it myself where they're, doing any number of drugs, trying to drive to work as fast as they can in the morning and driving back to California, driving other places. And they get into these major accidents. In the last week, we've seen a ton as if you follow these things. There's been a lot of really severe injury accidents. Part of the 15 was closed down last week because of one.
But that has nothing to do with the police not coming out.
It doesn't necessarily, but here's the thing that concerns me. If people know that the police aren't really going to be like checking up and seeing, if you're in an accident, you're immediately going to be busted by the police. If people know that they're not going to be following up on these things, isn't that somewhat of perhaps loosening the leash even more so on already dangerous drivers?
I would say no. And I would say no because people can still, and this is one of the caveats to this whole thing, you can still call the police if you get in an accident and say, you know what, I think the other driver's drunk or stoned or something like that, definitely out of sorts. And they will show up. They claim that they will show up if that claim is made, and they will ascertain whether or not the person's stoned or not.
You're absolutely correct on that. But here's the issue. What if the person who is injured or who's hit by that person is mildly injured? Maybe they have a little case of shock. Maybe their adrenaline is going. Maybe the other person, who I know a lot of people that are like this, is very good at masking their symptoms. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no,
are we the thing about having police out there is that they're trained to actually recognize what's happened in a scenario. They're trained to look at all of these different factors. The common individual is not. So there's a certain amount of education of the community that's going to have to go on here, and I don't know if everyone's quite ready for it.
But going back by what you said, if that other party who's not stoned is slightly injured or something like that, then once again, there's another reason to call the cops, and they will come out when there's an injury. So
there's a difference there, though, Alan.
Okay.
They're coming out when there's major injuries. They're not coming out necessarily if someone's going, my neck is kind of stiff, or I feel like there's something going on my back, but can I walk? Yeah, I can walk. And can you move your car? Well, yeah, I can move my car. Okay, well, then take care of it. That's pretty much the response that's being given now.
All right. Well, again, when I get the sheriff in, I'm going to all these questions I got for him, and we'll talk a lot.
I'm excited to hear what he has to say.
I will let you know when we get him in. It'll be he's usually in on a Tuesday, Wednesday, second or third. I forget what it is right offhand. We've got a book though. I know that, so I will let you know when. Heather Harris from Harris & Harris Injury Lawyers. Thank you so much for coming in. I appreciate it, and for the research and for getting information to us.
Thanks. I'm glad I could be here and help you out.
Great to do it. We'll do it again sometime. Heather Harris from Harris & Harris Injury Lawyers.